How's it going, aliens? My name's iALiEN. Today I'm back on another Identity 5 video, and today's video will be my updated Survivor tier list for Season 7. I recently did my updated Hunter tier list last week, so go to that if you want to see the Hunter side of things. But today is for Survivors, so let's get right into the video. Okay, before I get into how the tier list works, I do want to plug my Discord server. The link will be in the pinned comment below as well as in the description below. So let's discuss how this tier list works. There's D tier, C tier, B tier, A tier, and S tier. D tier are the worst survivors in the game. You can still use them. Survivor is different from Hunter. You can use literally any survivor in the game and win, because every survivor is going to decode at the same speed basically, and they can all throw pallets and they can all vault windows. You can all use the same persona, so you can use any survivor in this tier list and win with. So just because I say someone is D tier doesn't mean, oh, he's unviable, you can't play that character in, because you can play technically any character in Survivor and win. So D tier is just the worst survivors compared to everyone else. So compared to S tier survivors, they are just worse than them. So that's what D tier means. C tier is the next level of being worse. They're better than D tier survivors, but they're just meh. They usually just don't have a real purpose to be used. These survivors just don't have a purpose in C tier over the higher survivors. B tier survivors are really niche survivors, so they can be used and they can be viable when they're used correctly, but they're just niche. There are reasons to use these survivors, and there's playstyles to use them where they will succeed, but then they just aren't as versatile as A tier and S tier. A tier survivors are all very viable, very strong. You'll see a lot of them in top tiers. They're really good survivors. And then S tier survivors are the best survivors because they are the best at what they do. They are special, they are versatile, and what they do better than the other survivors in their category, and that's why they're S tier. So let's get into D tier. Actually, let's just start off with S tier. And in S tier, I have Lawyer. So I read all the comments, all the concerns that I put Lawyer in D tier. So I don't want the dislikes, so I'll put him in S tier. I'm just kidding. He's in D tier. Along with Garner. Lawyer and Garner are both in D tier. Garner's getting a buff soon. But Lawyer, still no news on the buff, so who knows if he'll ever get buffed. But at least Gardner's getting a buff. These two survivors, technically, like I said, you can play them and win with them, but compared to the other survivors, they're just worse than them, and they don't have a real purpose to be used. There's nothing that sets them apart from anyone else. Breaking chairs is not going to win you a game. There's no reason to break chairs when you can just kite for the time you should kite for 60 seconds and then just rescue and decode. There's no reason you should need to break chairs. And Lawyer is just, there's nothing really special about him. I mean, his map is pretty overpowered, but besides that, he's just meh. Next is C tier. I have Thief in C tier. Thief was originally, I think, in season 1 back. He was like S tier, but he's just falling and falling. He's just an obsolete character, basically. There's no reason to use him. He's a kiter with nothing to help his kiting. So every single kiter has their item helps their kiting, and his item doesn't, because his flashlight is not good. And if you use his flashlight against a Ripper or a clown or a spider, then good luck, because it's not going to work. So because of that, he's just an obsolete kiter. His vaulting speed is good. It's a nice addition, but items are way stronger than extra vaulting speed. A perfume is way stronger than better vaulting. Something magnet that can stun the hunters is way better than extra vaulting. So because of that, thief is just basically obsolete. Technically you can still use them, do fine with them, but compared to everyone else, he's just not as good. Next is Lucky Guy. It's basically the same thing. There's just no reason to use him because it's not even 100% chance you get the item you want. And plus, every item you get is worse than the item you would get if you just played the character. If you get a flare gun, it lasts for a shorter time than if you just play coordinator. Mechbot, you can't decode while incapacitated or chair, like if you're a mechanic. So there's just no reason. He's not as good as any of the survivors. He's a jack of all trades, but this game is very role based, to where you play each role, and then as long as everyone does their job correctly, you win. And there's not much need for a character to fill multiple roles when everyone in S and A tier are so good at filling their own role already. So Lucky Guy just doesn't really have a purpose. He's not bad, he's just not that good. Next in C tier is Explorer. He's a quote unquote decoder, but he doesn't really decode that much faster. It's his issue. And then if he gets caught, he's a bad kiter. He's a really bad kiter. And lastly, whenever he picks up a charge, the hunter gets a notification. So he's just, man, there's nothing. If his decoding was actually much faster, he could probably be like B tier. But since it's not, there's just no reason to use him. So he's C tier. Lastly in C tier is Wildling. And this is just Wildling in general. I have seen good Wildlings before, and if you play him well, then he can be almost as good, or even sometimes as good as a forward, but he's just much harder to use. His decoding's really bad, and he's also much more counterable. So because of that, he's C tier. But not to say you can't use him. He actually is pretty decent if you can learn him correctly. If you can learn how to stun on balloons with him when the hunter's in the pickup animation, if you charge them while they're in that animation, they'll actually drop the survivor. So when you do that, he's can be as good as forward, but that's tricky to do, and most Wildlings aren't going to be able to do it. Even the best Wildlings, it's still tricky because the timing has to be so on point that it's not always going to work. And while forward, it doesn't matter. You just stun the hunter and they're free. There's no, at this certain time you do this. So because of that, he's just a C tier survivor, but he's not bad. If you learn him, definitely go for it and try and get good with him. Next is B tier. These survivors are niche survivors. They aren't bad survivors, but they aren't the best survivors either. It's like if you see the survivor in your lobby, you aren't like, oh, that's a lawyer or gardener, but at the same time, you still have to wonder whether they'll actually be good, because these survivors are tricky to play and they just aren't always the best option. First in B tier is Cowboy. Cowboy is a pretty decent rescuer, and he can waste a lot of time. He's similar to Forward and Wildling. He can waste a lot of time. That's his job, and he can do that well. His lasso's good at balloon saves, and he's also very good at transitional saves. So he can lasso someone in the middle of them kiting to transition them to a better kiting area, and that can really help and really hurt the hunter. So he's really good at that, but his biggest downfall is that simply he's just not a great kiter. The only thing he has to help his kiting is his lasso, but his lasso is not a great kiting tool. It is a tool that you can use, and it works if you can lasso maybe over a confined space window, or if you can lasso to dodge hits, or a clown's dash. So it can work, and it is a tool, but it's nowhere near the level of forward's football as a kiting tool, which is very, very good, and Merc's elbow pads, which is an amazing kiting tool, or Cord's flare gun, which it gives you so much time to transition. He doesn't have that. His lasso is decent, but it just isn't as good as that. And he's the most vulnerable rescuer in the game. So because of those issues, he does not stack up to Ford or any of the other rescuers, but he still is good. You can use him. He works. I played him. Used to play him quite a bit. And he's not bad. He's just, there are issues about him that do make him worse than other rescuers. Next in B tier is Embalmer. Embalmer is just meh. But he can work. Embalmer, if you put the coffin at the right spot, like if you put the coffin in at the exit gate, that can basically win you a game. So he's making plays. He can make plays to win you a game. And now that Priestess got nerfed, he can do what Priestess was mainly used to do, like last season, which is coffin, get the survivor away. So like in a map like Leo's Memory, he can put the coffin on top floor of Leo's, and then embalm, let's say the Mind's Eye is on your team. So the hunter would usually chase the Mind's Eye and get a quick down, but now, even when he downs her, the Mind's Eye is in the best kiting spot in the game. So, and he has to run all the way up there. So at that point, she's gone. So the Embalmer is good at that, and he's a support character, and that helps your team as decoding is fine. There's no decoding debuff, no kiting debuff, and he has a support role that can be useful at times. So that's why he's a B tier survivor. It's not great. There's definitely survivors you would rather see played because they're better at kiting, or better at rescuing, or even better at decoding. But an Embalmer is not a bad survivor. Next in B tier is Priestess. She got nerfed. She was A tier before. Priestess was A tier before, but really S tier on Moonlit and Hospital and even Lakeside and Leo's. She was really S tier on those maps because of how strong she was. Her support, her tie turner, super portal was very, very good. It was complete meta, and she was an insanely OP kiter. But all of that got nerfed, so now she's not that good. But she's not bad either. If you can use the portals like in pallets, so then the hunter gets stunned and then you pallet stun them, you can use the portals and then you double back, so then the hunter goes through the portal but you went back the other way. That works. Her super portal is still useful. You can also use her as, like, think of her as a mini Prospector. Prospector is doing these short stuns, right, with his magnet. Priestess does the exact same thing. Set up the portals and you go through them, and then the hunter gets stunned for a short time, and that short time he's stunned gives you time to transition. The same way Prospector's magnets give a short stun, but that short stun time is all the time you need to transition. So Priestess is definitely not bad. You can use her as like a mini Prospector. Her super portal still has her uses to it, and her decoding is now pretty decent because that got buffed, and revolting speed is pretty decent. So Priestess is still good. She's not a terrible garbage survivor that you should never use. She's just also not meta because what made her meta got removed and nerfed. Next in B tier is the Mind's Eye. The Mind's Eye is just a very niche survivor. She's fine because of her decoding speed. Extra decoding is always good. Um, you can't. That's and her decoding is the fastest in the game, which is really good. But the problem is she's the most fragile survivor in the game. Unlike someone like Mechanic, who does most of her decoding from her doll, so she's never put in danger. And even if she is put in danger, she's still decoding on chair. Mind's Eye doesn't have that, so she has to put herself in danger to decode. Plus, when she gets put on chair, she's useless. So because of that, if you get down to 20 seconds as Mind's Eye, if a hunter spawns on you, you get down to 20 seconds, the game's basically over. You basically have to not save her at that point and just go for a tie. And when a survivor is that fragile, you usually don't want that on your team. You want survivors that can kite longer and just kite the regular 60 seconds. Because if they're good kiters, that's not that hard to get a 60 seconds kite to do 3 ciphers. You don't need to try and stack the coding speed and cipher rush. That's just not the meta. But Mind's Eye is not bad. You can hide with her. If you're good at hiding, that works. Or if you use your cane and then just try and hide from the hunter at the start so that he doesn't come on you, that works. Her decoding speed comes in handy, especially late game. Her accelerated decoding is insane. So she's not bad, but she's also just not great because of how fragile she is. Next in B tier is Doctor. Doctor is fragile as well, but she has her veterans bonus, which is good because that gives her extra speed boost, which helps her transition a lot. So you can just take broken windows plus veterans and then get to a place like Arms Factory or Leo's or Hospital. And with that transitional kiting, so if you got to like a place like Hospital or Arms, now you're in a strong kiting area, and because of how strong that area is, that's good enough to buy you at least around 30-40 more seconds to get that 3 cipher kite. So that helps her out, but overall she is a bad kiter. But she hard counters Photographer and Mad Eyes, and she also soft counters Dream Witch. So because of that, she's very niche. But against a photo, she's S tier. Against the Mad Eyes, she's S tier. Because the Dream Witch, she's probably A tier. So against those hunters, she's really good, and that gives her a purpose to be used, especially in a map like Arms Factory, where all 3 of those hunters are good at. But against a Ripper or a Spider, there's definitely no reason to use a Doctor on your team. But she's not bad, pretty good. She's just niche, so that's why she's B tier. And lastly in B tier is the newest survivor added into the game, First Officer. First Officer is B tier. He's a rescuer, but he just doesn't do his job as well as the other rescuers. He's not a bad rescuer by any means. He will usually complete the rescue, which is really good about him, that there's no risk of rescuing with him because his movements are delayed by a second. But that's it. He's just okay. He can't really go for double rescue like Mercenary, and double rescue is very important to be able to go for both rescues. He's not buying you time like Coordinator's flare gun. He can't waste the hunter's time like Ford's football. So he's just not doing anything besides just rescuing, and he has with his decoding debuff. So he's just decent. First Officer isn't going to ruin the game, but he isn't going to save it either. His biggest issue is that his trait, his item, is basically useless. If we're being honest, his skill is basically useless. His thing that takes away the hunter's vision for like a half a second and then makes everyone look like him, it doesn't do anything because it's easy to tell which survivor is the survivor you were chasing. It's not difficult. No hunter, 99% of the time, the hunter is not going to get confused by him using his illusion thing. So that's really his biggest issue. If that got buffed into where it was useful, then he would be probably A tier and definitely have a place. But because it's not, he's just man, he's just a decent survivor and a decent rescuer. Next is A tier. These survivors are very viable. They're meta. They're really good. They are really good survivors. Like, all of these survivors are insanely strong. First in A tier is Dancer. Dancer moved up from B tier. And Dancer's really good. They took away her decoding debuff, and before that they took away her other debuff. So now she is a strong kiter, one of the strongest kiters in the game, if not the strongest kiter, with no weakness, no downsides, plus even a kiting buff in maps like Lakeside that have elevation, because you get a speed boost when you fall down. So there's nothing wrong with her, and she's just really strong. Her slow boxes are great, and her kiting is amazing. And if you use her correctly, she's basically a survivor the hunter can't even chase, because that's an automatic through Cypher's kite. And if he doesn't chase you, you're decoding at the same speed as everyone else. So she's definitely really meta, and she's really strong. I just don't have her S tier because all she does is is kite. She doesn't have a decoding buff. She doesn't have a rescuer buff. She can't waste the hunter's time like Enchantress. So she's just a strong kiter, and she's really good. And that's why A tier survivors are really good, but they just aren't anything like that's super versatile. Like, Dancer's not super versatile like the other S tier survivors. Next in A tier is Coordinator. I'm happy to see Coordinator at A tier again. She was B tier in my last tier list, but she got buffed, and now she is really strong, and she's meta. Coordinator in a perfect team comp, Coordinator is in it. A perfect team comp is Mechanic, Seer, Coordinator, and Mercenary / Forward. That's the perfect team comp, to run double rescue with Coordinator. So she's definitely meta because of her buff, which was really good for her. And also that double rescue is so strong, whether it's Forward in Coordinator or Mercenary in Coordinator, they're both really good. So the only reason she's not S tier is because she's a secondary rescuer. She's not the main rescuer. She's not Mercenary, who's the main rescuer. So that a Merc can be used by himself. Forward can be used by himself. Cord technically can be used by herself, but there are definitely better options. Forward or Merc are both better than her by themselves if you're only going to use one rescuer, but Coordinator is just insanely strong with double rescue. So she's really good, and she's back to being top tier, which I'm really happy to see. Next in A tier is Magician. He's been A tier forever. He recently got buffed, which was nice. A nice buff to where his rescue time is shorter than it was before. So that's great. He's a great kiter. His illusions are really strong. He counters Clown and Ripper. He decodes at a nice speed. The only thing about him is, like Dancer, he's a good kiter with he does have a downside, but not that big a counterable downside, but he doesn't do anything else. Like, can't stun on balloons, he's not a great rescuer. So because of that, he's an A tier survivor, but he's really good kiter and strong. Magician has always been, he still is. Next in A tier is Acrobat. Acrobat is new. He's really good. Acrobat is a really good survivor, and he's a really good kiter. It's because his balls that take away, that either slows the hunter's movement speed, slows the hunter's actions, or takes away their skills, are all good. And once you realize when to use them, and you know when to use each ball, he's really strong. And on just that alone, he would be A tier because of that. But on top of that, you can just use the balls to vault windows. You don't even need to use them correctly. Just the fact that he can, early game, he's basically invincible at windows because he doesn't vault them. So unlike other survivors that vault and they can get terror shocked or they can get hit after they've finished the vaulting animation, he can't get hit after that because he just uses the ball to vault the window. And because of that, he's a very, very good kiter. And so just either one of those alone, if he just had one of those, he would be A tier. But the fact that he has both of those makes him even better as an A tier survivor. So he's really good. Acrobat's a strong kiter. He really doesn't have any downsides. His only downside is the opening the exit gate. I think they buffed that, so he actually opens the exit gate faster than before. But that's his only downside, and that's not a big one at all. So he's really good. Lastly, in A tier is Prospector. Prospector is a very, very good survivor. He's one of the strongest kiters in the game, and on top of that, he can stun on balloons, which wastes Hunter's time. So he's really good. But the reason he's not S tier instead of A tier is because while Enchantress, as you obviously can know at this point, is S tier, Prospector's A tier, is Enchantress Prospector's probably the better kiter early game, but Enchantress is the better kiter late game, and she's better at secondary kites, and also she's better at stunning on balloons. It's much easier to counter Prospector's magnets on balloons than it is to counter Enchantress stun on balloons. So she does a much better job than Prospector at that, and that really pushes her over the edge over him. Also, Prospector can easily hurt you. Using his magnets can hurt you more than it helps you, because you can cancel the Hunter's attack recovery. Enchantress technically can cancel a Hunter's attack recovery, but it's much harder to do and it's much less likely to do than Prospector canceling the Hunter's attack recovery. Spider kills Prospector. If you're a good Spider, you can easily cancel his attack recovery every single time because of how fast you are. So Prospector is a great survivor, great kiter, wastes Hunter's time, but he is slightly, just slightly worse than Enchantress, and that little bit tips him to the top of A tier, while Enchantress is at the bottom of S tier. And lastly, we have S tier. S tier survivors are the best survivors in the game. They're great survivors. No. I skipped one in A tier. Never mind. The last survivor in A tier, my bad, is Ford. Ford is an A tier survivor. He is an amazing rescuer. He's the best at wasting time, and him and Mercenary are just as good. Ford plus Cord is just as good as Mercenary plus Cord, but the reason he's A tier is because he's just harder to use and he's more risky to use. A lot more can go wrong with the Ford than can go wrong with the Mercenary, and also he's much better on PC. Without a doubt, on PC he's S tier 100%, but on mobile, even though he's still really good, as you can see in the latest Chinese tournament, they have to play on mobile, and half of the teams use Ford, half of the teams use Mercenary. So when used correctly, Ford is an S tier survivor. Don't get me wrong, he's S tier. He's just as good as Mercenary, but the problem is he's riskier, and not that many people can use him correctly. So for that reason, he's A tier. Now let's get into S tier. S tier survivors are the best survivors in the game. They're great, and they are versatile. Either they are versatile or they're the best at what they do. So if they're a rescuer, they're the best at that. If they're a decoder, they're the best at that. Or they bring something to the table that no other survivor can bring to the table, and that is actually really useful. So like Embalmer, he's the only person who can embalm people, but that's not nearly as useful as obviously a Seer's owl. So That's what I mean by that. So first in S tier is Enchantress. Enchantress is an S tier survivor. She's a great kiter. She's amazing on rebound kites, on your second kite when you're coming back from a chair, because she can basically function as a mini coordinator. She works perfectly with both Mercenary and Forward. If you don't have a cord, she works great without one, and she also works great with one because it's just more stuns. So Enchantress is great. She's really good at kiting. She's really good against spiders. She's good against Ripper, and she's good against clowns. So no one really counters her except for Dream Witch. So that makes her really strong. And the reason that she's S tier, while other amazing kiters like Dancer, Magician, Acrobat, Prospector are A tier, is because she brings something else to the table. Not only is she an amazing kiter, but she also can waste the hunter's time by stunning on balloons and act as a forward. And like I said earlier, Prospector can also do that, but she's much better at it because it's faster, it's harder to dodge, and she can waste a lot of time. And when you need that 5 seconds, 10 seconds left to decode that cipher at the end of the game, as Survivor, if the Enchantress is over there, then you're good because she's just going to stun and you're fine. And she can save so many games with that, and that's why she's an S tier survivor. Next in S tier is Perfumer. Perfumer is an S tier survivor because she's a great kiter, just as good of a kiter as all the other ones I named. And she can decode well, barely has any downsides besides her healing speed and her calibrations, but no one's really going to miss calibrations, so that's fine. And the reason why she's S tier over the A tier kiters is that she's a great rescuer as well. And that really gives her the place, because even though she won't have to rescue, with Mercenary and Mechanic being the main, if that's your team comp, an ideal team comp, it'll be a Merc rescuing and then a Mechanic. But what if Mechanic's hurt? What if Merc gets double hit? And someone has to go save off of that Ripper? All the other survivors, when you're going to save off of that Ripper, then you can easily get stuffed on the save and double hit. But Perfumer, no, it's 100%. If you use her correctly, you aren't going to get stuffed because you just perfume on the Foggy Blade, and there you go. You're going to make the save. She's an amazing rescuer, and that can really come into handy, and that's a great trait about her that Magician does not have, that Dancer does not have, that Acrobat does not have, that Prospector doesn't have. Not even Enchantress is a great rescuer, but Perfumer is, and that's why she's S tier, because that's what she's bringing to the table besides just kiting. Now, is her kiting as good as Dancer? I don't think so. Is her kiting as good as Magician? Arguably, I'd say they're around the same. It just depends on which hunter you're facing. Acrobat, like, she's nearly as good. She's basically as good of a kiter as everyone else, but she can also rescue, which is why she's S tier. Next in S tier is the best rescuer. It is Mercenary. He's an S tier survivor. He's the most popular rescuer used, and he's the best because he can double save. Simply as that. That's why he's the best rescuer. Because of the meta, the way the game works, if someone's down, you have 2 ciphers left, one person's on chair, and you need that 2 ciphers. You need 2 people working on a cipher and someone going to save. So if the cord is decoding slow at that cipher, it's not going to be finished. So the rescuer ideally makes both saves so that the faster decoders can continue to decode. And Mercenary can do that because he gets hit, whatever, and then he can make the second save. And because of that, he's always going to be meta. He's always going to be an S tier survivor because he's so great at what he does. On top of that, it's impossible to catch him early game if he's good, and his chair time is great, and his decoding really doesn't matter. He's a rescuer. Obviously, the rescuer probably is going to have a decoding debuff. That's not a big deal. So Mercenary is S tier. And last 2 in S tier are the 2 most vital survivors in the game. These are the 2 best survivors in the game. They're S tier, everyone's S tier, But these are the two best survivors, and that's Seer first. Seer is an amazing survivor because he can kite, he can decode, he can even rescue if he hasn't used his owl. But he has the owl, and that owl is why he's S tier and why he's always going to be, because he can make any kite into a 3 cipher kite. He makes every single character in the game take 3 hits instead of 2. Every single character in the game. For the hunter, instead of having to get 2 hits, you have to get 3 hits now. And those 3 hits can turn it from a 50-second kite to a 70-second kite, and that could mean the difference between a win and a loss. That's why I banned Seer as hunter. I ban him every single game, because I just don't like dealing with having to hit someone 3 times. On top of that, he hard counters Dream Witch, which is a great bonus. So Seer's S tier, and his partner is Mechanic. Mechanic is S tier as well, best survivor in the game along with Seer because of her doll. The fact that she can decode while on chair is something that no one else can do, and that makes the cipher rush 10 times greater. Plus she decodes fast. Plus she can use tie turner, which is amazing to have a secondary tie turner. She can save and decode at the same time. She can rescue and decode a cipher at the same time. That's just insane. And Mechanic is always going to be S tier as well, because these survivors is just not going to change. The abilities they have are so strong and better than what the other survivors have that nothing's ever going to change. Mechanic has been S tier from day 1, and a year later she's still the best survivor in the game. She's been the best survivor for a year. She still is. I never see her not being. So she's the most banned survivor in top tiers is Mechanic. Mechanic gets banned a lot because her decoding is insane, and the cipher rush capabilities with her is amazing. So Mechanic is still S tier. That will conclude this tier list. If you did enjoy this tier list, make sure to give me a like after the video. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, please subscribe to the channel. And that'll be all for the video. Bye.